Now for another story from the field. This one's coming from Oxford, England, at St. Aldate's Church. St. Aldate's is an old, well-established historic church. This is where George Whitefield came to faith when he was a student at Oxford, which is in many ways a good connection to many of us, because some of us serve in churches that have a long history, and the hope for awakening in those contexts can sometimes be pretty challenging. This is also a church that's in a university city. And you know, we all are carrying a great concern and a heart cry for Gen Z, for emerging adults. And so right in the crossroads of that, we have a beautiful story coming from a great new friend, StephenFoster, who's the vicar there. So let's welcome Stephen, if we can bring him in. There he is. All right, Stephen, welcome. So, Stephen, that looks like your office there at the church. Is that right? Are you?
Yeah, that's right. I'm here in the center of Oxford.
Yes. Well, Stephen, give us a little bit of a snapshot of St. Aldate's. Tell us about your context. What's the church like? What's the city like? And just sort of set the stage, and then we'll hear a little bit more of what you've been seeing there.
So there's been Christian worship on our site for over 1,000 years, and it's an amazing place. So our church is right at the center of the city, and basically about 100, 200 years after they built the church, they thought maybe we need to build a university around it. So Oxford University surrounds our church, and we've got about 50,000 students within just a few miles of the church. And the city is a fascinating mix of kind of young professionals, young adults, young families, people working for startups that have spun out of the university, and also actually areas of real deprivation as well. So we have a big social action, social transformation ministry, lots of prison leavers and recovering addicts in the church, alongside people who come here for a few years to be skilled in leadership and learning to go out and transform the cities of the world. So that's where we are.
Yeah. So, Stephen, I know that over the last few years, and certainly these past several months, you've experienced sort of waves of renewal, waves of activity among students and others that have been sort of unexplainable in human terms. And I'm wondering if you could just sort of narrate that story for us. Tell us, what have you been seeing?
Yeah, so it's a fascinating time. And I think over the last, couple of years, we've seen these waves of God moving. And it's been a really, I think the first wave was lots of people were coming to faith, and they were what I would call surprising, sudden, and supernatural conversions. So people who hadn't previously been churchgoers or been exposed to church or had any real awareness even of who Jesus was, would be turning up at church and coming to a service, and within a service would be saying they wanted to start a journey of following Jesus. And that was really inconvenient for us, because I've given seminars why that doesn't happen anymore. And I've said, oh, the Engels, you have to move people gradually down the line and all that sort of stuff. And then we were finding a whole load of young adults, and particularly Gen Z, who were encountering Jesus in a really short space of time. But they weren't just sudden conversions, they were deep conversions. And they're still sustained today. So over the last couple of years, they're still going on with Jesus, and now we've raised them up as leaders. So that was like the first wave, which was really exciting. And that's grown and grown and grown. And then we started to see this amazing boldness amongst Gen Z inviting their friends. So one young student, her mother wrote to me and she said, "What's happened to my daughter?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "She had real anxiety before she went to university, college. And she invited 11 of her friends to church. And they all came." And I was like, that's extraordinary. Lots of people don't have 11 friends, but to have 11 friends and then more to come is a really extraordinary thing. So there was this boldness of invitation. And then we started to see chain reactions. So there was a young woman, Sam, who's doing a PhD, a doctorate in how physics algorithms help you better understand evolutionary biology. And if you don't understand that, ask David afterwards, because he really gets that science.
Yeah.
And I don't understand it. And she came on Alpha at our church, had a powerful encounter with Jesus. But then she was visiting from Yale. She's here for a few years from Harvard, And then her brother came from Yale, and he's a lawyer. And he she said, well, why don't you explore faith while you're in Oxford? So he came, he encountered Jesus, and then he invited someone at his college, and she came, Daisy, and she encountered Jesus and then got baptized. And on her day of her baptism, a friend from her college came and encountered Jesus, was saved. So we've seen what I would call chain reactions of people coming to faith, which has been really exciting. So it's almost like 4 generations of faith within just 6 months. And then in terms of youth, so what we call youth in the US, kind of 11 to 18-year-olds, we really felt that the Lord say, pray for your youth. And I said to my youth pastors, I think we might be experiencing another wave in January. And they said, oh, you definitely are. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, on Friday night, these youth turned up who had no previous experience of church. And I said, how comes? And they said, they had dreams. And so it turns out one of the girls, she woke up in the middle of the night and she was having this dream. And in her dream, there was a voice saying, you need to read Luke's gospel about Jesus. And there was an open Bible in her dream at Luke's gospel. And so she woke up completely freaked out, as you can imagine, not a churchgoer, no faith background. She's 17 years old. And so she thought, I don't even know if we have a Bible in our house. So she turned to her right, turned on the lamp, on her bedside table. And there on her bedside table was a Bible open at Luke's gospel, which completely terrified her. So she goes to school the next day and says to her friend, you'll never guess what happened last night. I had this crazy dream. And so her friend said, I had a crazy dream. And he had a dream where someone was saying words like words from Isaiah or Revelation, and there was an eye wreathed with angel wings and something like holy, holy, holy. So he was like completely freaked out. And then the third friend said, I had a crazy dream. So these 4 17-year-olds turn up at our youth night and they say, help, we don't understand the dreams. So we call them the dreamers now. And we were talking about it as a team, and basically we sensed, isn't it amazing that God would be so passionate about reaching the rising generation, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, that he would wake them up in the night with dreams in order to get them to a church? And we've seen that in our student congregation as well. People who completely never thought of coming to church, having dreams standing outside our church, and a person coming from inside the church in their dream and saying, look, you've got to come in here. So there's been a wave of like what you might describe as kind of like supernatural signs and miraculous healings. We've seen some of those as well. And I think for us, it's a sign that it's been quite a challenging time for teenagers and for young adults. There's been crises in the church, leadership crises in the church, failings. There's been political crises. I know obviously in the US, there's a lot of polarization. We have a bit of that here too. There's all the stuff around digital stuff, the age of anxiety and generation anxiety, Jonathan Haid's stuff. There's all the challenges with, I guess, identity and just trying to navigate what it means, who you are at kind of 14, 15. And what I find amazing is that there's people in that generation who are still going and actually even more passionate about following Jesus. And so I think that's just the sort of generation that Jesus would say, right, this is generation. We're going to pour out our spirit on this generation, like the Holy Spirit, because they've been given every possible excuse to walk away from the church and walk away from Jesus, and yet they're still there. So I think what we're finding is that generation is marked by an extraordinary love for Jesus, because in spite of their suffering, they have remained faithful to him.
Beautiful, Stephen. Stephen, could you talk with us a little bit about what you have been learning as a leader, as a pastor? How are you helping your church respond across all the generations? What are you learning about prayer, about preaching, or anything that you want to touch on? How is this affecting you?
Yeah, I think it's stretching. I've suddenly realized me on my own is never going to be enough. So I think, and we've sensed that as a team, our dependence on Jesus has grown exponentially, and our need, like our commitment to prayer. I've personally felt so convicted about prayer and consecration over more than ever before over the last 9 months. And as a team, that's just become like the lifeblood of our team, I think. So that's a big thing, a growing dependence on God. And I think actually that as you're experiencing these things, the importance of almost interpreting them for the congregation, because it's very easy for the more mature generations in your church to think, oh, it's just for the youth. And actually, we feel really called to say, no, we need every generation in the church to come alongside, disciple and mentor and support these people who are coming to faith. So one of the most exciting things I've experienced is people in their 50s and 60s and even 70s saying, this is what we've been praying for generations. It's happening. How can we help? They're so excited about it. And so I think that's a really important thing. And actually, even, last week there was someone who came to faith who was retired, just third time in church. So it's not just limited to Gen Z and Gen Alpha, but that's probably where we're seeing the vast majority of the movement. And so just trying to encourage each generation to see how they're complementary and how we desperately need people who have seen a few winters, who have walked with Jesus for a long time, and who can pour out their lives into the lives of these people who are coming to faith.
Yeah, thank you. So last question, Stephen. You're talking to a room of several hundred people whose hearts beat for what you're experiencing there at St. Aldate's. Is there a word of challenge or encouragement, any exhortation, any word of just strengthening that you would want to share with us? Just give us. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I think what I'd say is there's a narrative out there that the church is on the decline. It's a really challenging season, and all the political dynamics, cultural dynamics, all the cultural forces at play mean it's almost impossible to be a church leader. And I would just resist that really strongly. I feel this is probably the most exciting moment for evangelism, personally in my life. And I think we are shifting now, and I think this is true globally. We're certainly seeing it where we are. We're, in one sense, quite a progressive city and very young demographically. But I know from a number of countries, I think we're shifting from what you might have described as a post-Christian context, where people are losing the faith of their parents, they're deconstructing, church feels smaller every year, and you look back to the glory days when it was easy and everyone read J.I. Packer when they were 15 as a rites of passage. And you look back with a sense of loss, and I think we're moving from a post-Christian context to a pre-Christian context. And in a pre-Christian context, actually, there's this amazing opportunity because people don't, I think in a post-Christian context, people are given enough of the gospel, they're injected with enough of the gospel to inoculate themselves from its power for life, but not enough so it really captures their heart. That's kind of the post-Christian context. You get a little bit through the culture and maybe through, a bit of this and a bit of that, but you think, oh, I know that, and you walk past it. Whereas in a pre-Christian context, actually it's fresh snow. We've had people, this girl, Nasaga, young woman, Hindu background, no previous experience of faith really, and didn't even really know the name of Jesus. And so when she read about Jesus in the Gospels, it just set her heart on fire. And I think this is a time to kind of bet the farm, as you might say in Texas, or bet the oil well, and just go all out for reaching people with the good news of Jesus Christ, because there's this extraordinary openness in Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and when they see Jesus, and this is one of my convictions, if you can show people Jesus as he is, the authentic Jesus, unvarnished, unfiltered, it's almost impossible for this rising generation to see Jesus as he is and to walk away unchanged by him. Yeah. And this is a moment when the generation is desperate to see what Jesus brings. And so be bold, go for it, pray your socks off, and know that this is a generation that desperately wants to hear what you have to say.
Let's thank Stephen for coming to talk to us. Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephen. Bless you. Let's just take a moment and just sit with that story. I'd love just a moment of silence with it. Let's just there's great power in testimony. We have great victory in the blood of the Lamb and the word of testimony. So let's just let this rest with us for a second.